Material things are vibrations, and they are vibrating at you now in the same way as the sound is vibrating on your ears. In other words, the present world that you see is a vibration coming just as the sound comes out of silence. The light is coming out of space. It's coming out of nothing straight at you now and echoing away into the past. So the course of time is really very much like the course of a ship in the ocean. Because here's the ship, you see, and it leaves behind it a wake. And the wake fades out, and that tells us where the ship has been, in just the same way as the past and our memory of the past tells us what we have done. But as we go back into the past, and we go back and back to prehistory, and we use all kinds of instruments and scientific methods for detecting what happened, we eventually reach a point where all record of the past fades away in just the same way as the wake of the ship. Now, the important thing to remember in this illustration is that the wake doesn't drive the ship any more than the tail wags the dog.
Yo, check it out, it's Great Corner Chef rocking with a Killer of the Dawn, you heard? You know what it is, man.
What I'm saying is I think this. I'm trying to share with you a certain style of life and an attitude to life and an insight. I've taken you on one side and said, listen, kids, things aren't what they seem. Don't be fooled. Listen, kids, things aren't what they seem. Don't be fooled. Listen, kids, things aren't what they seem. Don't be fooled. There's a big deception going on, and you're involved in it, but I just thought you ought to know it. I'm terribly puzzled about the way people go out of their way to disenjoy themselves. They take so much trouble about it. And all around you have only to look and you see this perfect passion for making the world look grisly. And it isn't only job builders and garage owners who do this kind of thing, it's also people who profess to be painters. They're actually using excrements for painting in Paris today, on the theory that the world is shot to pieces, and that since the artist is a representative of his times, he ought to show the times as they really are, as a social critic. So he makes the most weird. He paints Campbell's soup cans, and he makes music that shrieks and screams. He just goes out of his way to make it sound as ugly as he possibly can manage. And the ingenuity is about that is endless. Because that is the times. This is critical. See? Listen, kids, things aren't what they seem. Don't be fooled. Listen, kids, things aren't what they seem. Don't be fooled. Listen, kids, things aren't what they seem. Don't be fooled. There's a big deception going on, and you're involved in it, but I just thought you ought to know it. Let's take the character of the Pied Piper, the person who brings you an invitation to dance. I say then, you see, there is going to be a dance this evening, and I would like you all to come. That's the spirit in which I invite you to a seminar. I am not inviting you in the spirit of saying, no, we're going to have to discuss some very grave matters, and you ought to be awake to all these things and arouse your social conscience. When you get through with all that, then what? When you get through with all that, then what? When you get through with feeding the hungry and clothing the naked, and we are making great strides with automation and technology in abolishing poverty totally, then what are we going to do? Then what are we going to do? Well, you see, if you've got all these people clothed and fed and so on, then they say, well, now what next? If you've got a kind of Quakerish state of mind, you don't know what to do. Well, feed and clothe somebody else. Get busy. But then, where is that leading? Listen, kids. Things aren't what they seem. Don't be fooled. Listen, kids. Things aren't what they seem. Don't be fooled. Listen, kids. Things aren't what they seem. Don't be fooled. There's a big deception going on, and you're involved in it, but I just thought you ought to know it. Listen, kids, things aren't what they seem. Don't be fooled. Listen, kids, things aren't what they seem. Don't be fooled. Listen, kids, things aren't what they seem. Don't be fooled. There's a big deception going on, and you're involved in it, but I just thought you ought to know it.
The self has thus the capacity to abandon itself, to forget itself, to hide from itself, and thus to make the most completely convincing illusion. But in play. And so the activity, the creative activity of the Godhead in Hindus is called Leela, which means play. Play. Our word lilt is related to it, I think. But so also in the book of Proverbs, you will find a discourse being given by the divine wisdom. The Lord possessed me in the beginning of his ways before his works of old. Its delight was to rejoice, the King James Bible says, in the presence of God and with the sons of men. But the Hebrew translated rejoice says play. 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 Rejoice is a sort of dignified Elizabethan, but it says play. And St. Thomas, aware of this, said that the divine wisdom was above all to be compared with games, because games are played for their own sake, not for any ulterior motive.
Meaning wave, because music is everything.
And so that is a nice little tangle. If I put this in the language of Oriental philosophy and religion, it would be something like this. The Buddha said that wisdom must come only from the abandonment of selfish craving or desire. The Buddha said that wisdom must come only from the abandonment of selfish craving or desire. One who abandons that desire attains nirvana, which is supreme peace. liberation. Nirvana means in Sanskrit, blow out. That is, exhale the breath. Exhale the breath. The opposite, desire, is to breathe in. Now, if you breathe in and hold it, you lose your breath. But if you breathe out, it comes back to you. It comes back to you. The Buddha said that wisdom must come only from the abandonment of selfish craving or desire. The Buddha said that wisdom must come only from the abandonment of selfish craving or desire. So the principle here is, if you want life, don't cling to it. Let go. Let go. But the problem is, if I desire not to desire, is that not already desire? How can I desire not to desire? How can I surrender myself when myself is precisely an urge to hold on, to cling to life, to continue to survive? To survive. To survive. The Buddha said that wisdom must come only from the abandonment of selfish craving or desire. The Buddha said that wisdom must come only from the abandonment of selfish craving or desire. I can see rationally that by clinging to myself, I may strangle myself. I may be like a person who has a bad habit, as a result of which he is committing suicide. And he knows that, but can't give it up, because the means of death are so sweet.
Monks used to keep skulls on their desks. And people nowadays think that was very morbid. Everything's falling apart. So don't try and stop it. When you're falling off a precipice, it doesn't do you any good to hang on to a rock that's falling with you. See? But everything is doing that. And so, again, this is another case of our completely wasting our energy in trying to prevent the world from falling apart.
Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. And then you'll be able to do something interesting with the free energy. 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 Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. When the Hindu says everything is unreal, the Westerner reacts and says, no, you can't treat life as a dream. It's serious, it's real, it's for real. And what do you mean by that? And what do you mean by that? Well, how real do you want it to be? This is, in other words, everything, insofar as it's falling apart, everything is changing, it is like smoke.
And we all feel that smoke has a lesser degree of reality than wood. It's an image of the evanescent, of the ghostly. So there's this idea the whole world is this mirage. That doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It's only bad if you cling to it, if you try to lean on it. But if you don't lean on it, it's a grand illusion. So the word Maya means not only illusion, but it means art, it means magic, and it means creative power. So this is the big act. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. And then you'll be able to do something interesting with the free energy. With the free energy. With the free energy. Don't do it. And it's perhaps easier to feel the world in that way in a tropical country where death is very common and where you just watch things dissolve before your eyes and yet burst out and grow again. The whole world is changing. Maybe easier to think that way than in our environment. Although when you're out in California, the human landscape changes so fast that no town is the same for 2 years. Any mailing list that you have changes 1/3 addresses per annum. Nothing stays put. The hills are shadows and they flow from form to form and nothing stands.
It's a beautiful day to be alive here at the peak of recorded human civilization.
Akira.
He's got clout.
And what seems a good thing today turns out tomorrow to have been a disaster. What seemed in the moral and spiritual sphere too, like great virtues in times past, are easily seen today as hideous evil. Let's take, for example, the Inquisition. In its own day, among Catholics, the Holy Inquisition was regarded as we today regard the practice of psychiatry. You feel that in curing a person of cancer, almost anything is justified. The most complex operation, the most weird surgery. People suspended for days and days on end on the end of tubes with X-ray penetration, burning. Or people undergoing shock treatment. People locked in the colorless, monotonous corridors of mental institutions. In all good faith, they knew that witchcraft and heresy were terrible things. Awful plagues, imperiling people's souls forever and ever. So any means were justified to cure people of heresy. We don't change. We don't change. We're doing the same thing today, but under different names. We don't change. We're doing the same thing today, but under different names. We can look back at those people and see how evil that was. But we can't see it in ourselves. So therefore, beware of virtue. We don't. We're doing the same thing today, but under different names. We don't.
beware. Virtue. So therefore, beware. Virtue.
This is Source Wave Radio by Akira the Don. You are listening to Flash Vibes.
We white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, British, German, American, have been on a rampage for the past 100 or more years to improve the world. To improve the world. We have given the benefits of our culture, our religion, our technology to everybody, except perhaps the Australian Aborigines. And we have insisted that they receive the benefits of our culture, even our political styles, our democracy. You better be democratic, or we shoot. And having conferred these blessings all over the place, we wonder why everybody hates us. See, because sometimes doing good to others, and even doing good to oneself, is amazingly destructive. Because it's full of conceit. How do you know what's good for other people? How do you know what's good for you? If you say you want to improve, you ought to know what's good for you. But obviously you don't. Because if you did, you would be improved. How do you know what's good for other people? How do you know what's good for you? If you say you want to improve, you ought to know what's good for you. But obviously you don't. Because if you did, you would be improved. So we don't know. It's like the problem of geneticists, which they face today. I went to a meeting of geneticists not so long ago where they gathered in a group of philosophers and theologians and said, now look here, we need help. We now are on the verge of figuring out how to breed any kind of human character we would want to have. We can give you saints, philosophers, scientists, great politicians, anything you want. Just tell us. What kind of human beings want we to be? So, I said, how will those of us who are genetically unregenerate make up our minds what genetically generate people might be? Because I'm afraid very much that our selection of virtues may not work. It may be like, for example, this new kind of high-yield grain, which is becoming ecologically destructive. When we interfere with the processes of nature and breed efficient plants and efficient animals, there's always some way in which we have to pay for it. And I can well see that eugenically produced human beings might be dreadful. We could have a plague of virtuous people. You realize that? Do you realize that? Any animal considered in itself is virtuous, does its thing, but in crowds they're awful. Like a crowd of ants or locusts on the rampage. They're all perfectly good animals, but it's just too much. I could imagine a perfectly pestiferous mass of 1 million saints. How do you know what's good for other people? How do you know what's good for you? If you say you want to improve, you ought to know what's good for you. But obviously you don't.
Because if you did, you would be improved. How do you know what's good for other people? How do you know what's good for you? If you say you want to improve, you ought to know what's good for you. But obviously you don't. Because if you did, you would be improved.
So I said to these people, look, there's the only thing you can do. Just be sure that a vast variety of human beings is maintained. Don't please breed us down to a few excellent types. Excellent for what? Excellent for what? We never know how circumstances are going to change and how our need for different kinds of people changes. We may need very individualistic and aggressive people. At another time, we may need very cooperative, team-working people. At another time, we may need people who are full of interest in dexterous manipulation of the external world. At another time, we may need people who explore into their own psychology and are introspective. There is no knowing. The more varieties and the more skills we have, obviously, the better. So you see, here again, the problem comes out in genetics. We do not really know how to interfere with the way the world is. Contrast between the words we use, explicit and implicit. They're very valuable words. What is explicit? What's on the outside? Let's say how we come on publicly. Explicitly, we are thus and so. We have a fight. We're in competition, say, in business, explicitly. But implicitly, we've worked this out. We've agreed in a secret way that nobody knows about that this competition is extremely valuable to both of us. Take it politically, for example. Let's take the situation of Russia versus the United States. Explicitly, in public, this has to be a big fight. These two ways of life, these two ideologies are opposed. They say, no, we are... But behind the scenes, it's all been carefully worked out. You bet it has. That this opposition has to happen.
because our economy depends on it, and their economy depends on it. And everybody knows this who's smart. But there are a lot of people who get taken in by the propaganda, and they should be taken in because that makes the thing work. It's crazy. But that's the way it goes. 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 And everything works this way. When swans start to mate, they're not sure what they're supposed to do. And they begin to fight. I had a long talk about this with C.G. Jung. He lived on the edge of Lake Zurich, and he had a little summer house right on the water's edge, and there were many swans there. And I was getting up at the end of a conversation with him, and we were beginning to walk back to the main house, and I said, "Isn't it true that swans are monogamous?" And he said, "Yes, they are." He said, "Do you know, I have had most interesting relationships between these swans, and many of my female patients who thought they were homosexual." And Jung wasn't a sexual snob. I mean, he understood all the legitimacy of all kinds of sexual variations. But he said it has been a point of departure for our discussions. He said it's a very funny thing that when they begin to mate, they start fighting. And they don't know what it's all about, and then suddenly the fight turns into lovemaking. So that's what I mean. Underneath opposition, there is love. Underneath duality, there's unity. The Tweedledum and Tweedledee agreed. But it's crazy. But that's the way it goes. 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 See, here's that weaving principle. The things hold together by over, under, over, over, under, over, over, under. And that creates a stuff, it creates fabric, it creates clothing, it creates shelter, it creates what we call matter. Matter, mater, mother, and also the same word, maya, illusion. See, the world as a marvelous illusion. It's crazy, but that's the way it goes. 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 It's crazy. That's the way it goes. It's crazy. That's the way it goes. A marvelous illusion. marvelous illusion.
But that's the way it goes. It's crazy. But that's the way it goes.
Marvelous illusion.
But that's the way it goes. It's crazy. That's the way it goes.
You're listening to Akira the Don, artist, DJ, wavelord, and architect of the Meaning Wave universe.
You all had a tremendous humor. And he knew that nobody can be completely honest. You will try and have a great deal of success exploring your motivation and your dark, unconscious depths. That nobody can be completely honest. You will try and have a great deal of success. But there will be a certain point at which you will say, well, I've had enough of that. Do you see how, in a strange way, there's a certain sanity in that? When a person indulges in a certain kind of duplicity, of deception, there is something, you all laughed when I said that. There was something humorous about it. And this humor is a very funny thing. Basically, humor is an attitude of laughter about oneself. There is malicious humor, which is laughing at other people. But real deep humor is laughter at oneself. Now, why fundamentally do you laugh about yourself? What makes you laugh about yourself? Isn't it because you know that there is a big difference between what goes on the outside and what goes on the inside? That if I hint, you see, that your inside is the opposite of your outside, it makes people laugh. If I don't do it unkindly. If I get up in the attitude of a preacher and say, you're a bunch of miserable sinners and you ought to be different, nobody laughs. But if I say, well, after all, boys will be boys and girls will be girls, and we all know, then people laugh. Nobody can be completely honest. You will try and have a great deal of success exploring your motivation and your dark, unconscious depths. That nobody can be completely honest. You will try and have a great deal of success. But there will be a certain point at which you will say, well, I've had enough of that. Now, you see, what's happening when we do that? Now, I passed you around a lot of embroidery to look at before we started. And I'm perfectly sure that you got the point. That there's a big difference between the front and the back. In some forms of embroidery, the back is very different from the front because people take shortcuts. In the front, everything is orderly, and it is supposed to be kind of messy on the back side. See, which side will you wear? You've got to be sure you get the front in front and have the back in the back. The back has all the little tricks in it, all the shortcuts, all the lowdown that people don't acknowledge. And it's exactly the same with the way we live. You know, like sweeping the dust under the carpet in a hurry just before the guests come. I mean, we do ever so many things like that. And if you don't do it, if you don't think you do it, and you think, well, really, my embroidery is the same on both sides, see? Well, you're deceiving yourself. Because what you're doing is you're taking the shortcuts in another dimension, which you're keeping out of consciousness. Everybody takes the shortcuts. Everybody plays tricks. Everybody has in himself an element of duplicity, of deception. Because you see, from this point of view that I'm discussing, where the web is the trap, To be is to deceive. Nobody can be completely honest. You will try and have a great deal of success exploring your motivation, your dark, unconscious depths. That nobody can be completely honest. You will try and have a great deal of success, but there will be a certain point at which you will say, well, I've had enough of that. To be is to deceive. To be is to deceive.
Hi, David Hasselhoff, alias The Hoff. You're listening to Akira the Dog. Stay tuned, stay tuned.
So, in the same way, we find that the watching self, or the observing self, behind all our thoughts and feelings, is itself a thought. That is to say, when the police enter a house in which there are thieves, the thieves go up from the ground floor to the first floor. When the police arrive on the first floor, the thieves have gone up to the second. And so to the third, and finally out to the roof. And so when the ego is about to be unmasked, it immediately identifies with the higher self. It goes up a level. Because the religious game is simply a refined and highbrow version of the ordinary game. How can I outwit me? How can I one-up me? So, if I find, for example, that in the quest for pleasure, the ordinary pleasures of the world, food, sex, power, food, sex, power, all this becomes a drag, and I think, no, it isn't there, so I go in for the arts, literature, poetry, music, and I absorb myself in those pleasures, food, sex, power, and I absorb myself in literature, poetry, music, those pleasures, food, sex, power, and I absorb myself in literature, poetry, music, food, sex, power, literature, poetry, music, food, sex, power. And after a while, they aren't the answer. So I go to psychoanalysis. And then I found out that's not the answer. I go to religion. But I'm still seeking what I was seeking when I wanted candy bars. I want to get that goodie. Only I see now that, of course, it's not going to be a material goodie. All material goodies fall apart. But maybe there's a spiritual goodie that's not going to fall apart. But in that quest, the quest is not different from the quest for the candy bar. Same old story. Only you've refined the candy bar, made it abstract and holy and blessed and so on. So it is with the higher self. The higher self's your old ego. And you sure hope it is eternal. Food, sex, power, I absorb myself in literature, poetry, music, those pleasures. Food, sex, power, I absorb myself in literature, poetry, music, those pleasures. Food, sex, power, I absorb myself in literature, poetry, music, those pleasures. Food, sex, power.
en masse, you know?
So, what instead, therefore, if we see that you can't outwit yourself, you can't be unself-conscious on purpose, you can't be designedly spontaneous, and you cannot be genuinely loving by intending to love. By intending to love. Either you love someone or you don't. Either you love someone or you don't. If you pretend to love a person, you deceive them and build up reasons for resentment. You say, well, I ought to be honest. That's the beginning of it. Oh, so many lies you can't imagine. So many lies you can't imagine. Either you love someone or you don't. Either you love someone or you don't. Like when I hear a lot said about love, the big love thing on. Everybody's got to love everybody. Everybody sings songs about love. Do you know what I do? I buy a gun and bar my door because I know there's a storm of hypocrisy brewing. I buy a gun and bar my door because I know there's a storm of hypocrisy brewing. Lao Tzu, the Chinese philosopher, said, the highest virtue is not virtue, and therefore really is virtue. But inferior virtue cannot let go of being virtue, and therefore is not virtue. Translated in more of a periphrastic way, the highest virtue is not conscious of itself as virtue. Therefore really is virtue. The highest virtue is not conscious of itself as virtue. And therefore really is virtue. Lower virtue is so self-conscious that it's not virtue. That it's not virtue. Lower virtue is so self-conscious that it's not virtue. That it's not virtue. In other words, when you breathe, you don't congratulate yourself on being virtuous. But breathing is a great virtue. It's living. It's living. When you come out with beautiful eyes, blue or brown or green as the case may be, you don't congratulate yourself for having grown one of the most fabulous jewels on earth. So it's just eyes. And you don't account it a virtue. To see, to to entertain the miracles of color and form. You say, well, that's just... But that's real virtue. Real virtue. Real virtue. Real virtue. The highest virtue is not conscious of itself as virtue, and therefore really is virtue. The highest virtue is not conscious of itself as virtue, and therefore really is virtue. Lower virtue is so self-conscious that it's not virtue. That it's not virtue. Lower virtue is so self-conscious that it's not virtue. That it's not virtue. Virtue in the sense, the old sense of the word, is strength. As when we talk about the healing virtue of a plant. That's real virtue. But the other virtues are stuck on. They're ersatz. They're imitation virtues. And they usually create trouble. Because more diabolical things are done in the name of righteousness. And be assured that everybody of whatever nationality or political frame of mind or religion always goes to war with a sense of complete rightness. The other side is the devil. Our opponents, whether in China or Russia or Vietnam, have the same feeling of righteousness about what they're doing as we have on our side. And the plague on both houses, because, as Confucius said, the goody-goodies are the thieves of virtue. The road to hell is paved with good intention. Grace. Well, ask God, maybe he'll give it to you. And the theologian will tell you, yes, God gives his grace freely. He gives it to all because he loves all. It's here like the air. All you have to do is receive it. Or a more orthodox, a Catholic Christian would say, all you have to do is to be baptized. to take the holy sacrament of the altar, the bread and wine, the body and blood of Christ, and there is the grace right there. And it's given by these simple physical means so that it's very easily and readily available. Well, a lot of people got baptized, and it doesn't always take. People fall from grace. Why do they? You see, we're just talking about the same old problem, but we've put it a step up. But it's the same problem. How can I improve myself? Was the first problem. The second problem is, you want grace. You want grace. You want grace. You want grace. How can I accept grace? They're both the same problem. Because you've got to make a move, which will put yourself out of your own control into the control of a better. If you don't believe in the Christian kind of a God, you can believe in the Hindu kind of a God, who is your inner self. You see, you've got a lower self, which you can call your ego. That's that little scoundrelous fellow, always out for me. But behind the ego, there is the Atman, the inner self, the inward light, as Quakers would call it, the real self, the spirit, which is substantially identical with God. So you've got to meditate in such a way that you identify with your higher self. Now, how do you do that? Well, you start by watching all your thoughts very carefully, watching your feelings, watching your emotions, so that you begin to build up a sense of separation between the watcher and what is watched. You want grace. You want grace. You want grace. You want grace. Carried away by your own stream of consciousness. You remain the witness, impassively, impartially, suspending judgment and watching it all go on. That seems to be something like progress. At least you're taking an objective view of what is going on. Of what is going on. You are beginning to be in a position to control it. But just wait a minute. Who is this self behind the self? The watching self. Can you watch that one? It's interesting if you do. Because you find out, of course, that this is just as the problem of grace is nothing more than a transposition of the first problem. How am I to be unselfish? By my own power. It becomes, how am I to get grace by my own power?
Akira.
He's got clout.
The web of life. Let me try from the first to indicate the point that we're aiming at. The point is this, that human consciousness is at the same time as being a form of awareness and sensitivity and understanding, it's also a form of ignorance. The ordinary everyday consciousness that we have leaves out more than it takes in. The ordinary everyday consciousness that we have leaves out more than it takes in. And because of this, it leaves out things that are terribly important. It leaves out things that would, if we did know them, allay our anxieties and fears and horrors. And if we could extend our awareness, you see, to include those things that we leave out, we would have a deep interior peace. Because we would all know the one thing that you mustn't know. The ordinary everyday consciousness that we have leaves out more than it takes in. The ordinary everyday consciousness that we have leaves out more. You know, according to the rules of our particular social game, the one thing you mustn't know, that's really not allowed, that is the lowdown on life. And then the lowdown, on the one hand, means the real dirt on things. But the lowdown is also what is profound, what is mysterious, what is in the depths. And there's something left out. And our everyday consciousness screens this out in the same way that when you say you have weaving, you have, say, on this rug here in front of us, when the black finishes here, the black threads will go underneath and then appear again over here, then they'll go underneath the white and then they'll appear again over here, you know? So that the back will be the obverse pattern of the front. Now, the world is like that. The ordinary everyday consciousness that we have leaves out more than it takes in. The ordinary everyday consciousness that we have leaves out more than it takes in. Our sense organs are selective. They pick out certain things. They're receptive. For example, we have a small band, what you might call a spectrum of light, of sound, of tactile sensation, and so on, to which the human organism is sensitive. But we know that outside that small band, there is a huge range of vibrations to which we have built instruments that are sensitive. Things like cosmic rays, ultraviolet rays, gamma rays, hard X-rays, and so on. They're all outside the band of our spectrum. And obviously, there are things that are outside the range of our instruments. We may build new instruments someday which will evoke, bring into our consciousness other orders of vibration altogether, but yet, as yet, we don't know about them. So you could imagine, you see, the universe is a vast system of vibrations and has infinite possibilities. The ordinary everyday consciousness that we have leaves out more than it takes in. The consciousness that we have leaves out more. The ordinary, everyday consciousness that we have leaves out more than it takes in. The ordinary, everyday consciousness that we have leaves out more than it takes in. The ordinary, everyday consciousness that we have leaves out more than it takes in. The ordinary, everyday consciousness that we have leaves out more than it takes in.
I've gone for many a run or a walk listening to your Alan Watts music, which I think is like the best Alan Watts remixes available on the internet or in the world, and they're incredible because I love Watts.
Do you know who Akira the Dawn is? Of course, he's amazing.
His name is Alan Watts, do you know?
The way the world actually is an enormously complex, interrelated organism. The way the world actually is an enormously complex, interrelated organism. The same problem arises in medicine because the body is a very complexly interrelated organism. And if you look at the body in a superficial way, you may see there's something wrong with it. Here's chickenpox, and there's spots that itch. You might say, well, spots are there, cut them off. So you kill the bug. Well, then you find you've got a real problem. Because you have to introduce some bugs to kill the bug. It's like bringing rabbits into Australia. And that starts going all over the place and getting out of there. But then you think, but now wait a minute. It wasn't the bugs in the blood. There are bugs all over the place. What was wrong with this person? That his blood system suddenly became vulnerable to those particular bugs. His resistance wasn't up. Therefore, what you should have given was not an antibiotic, but vitamins. Okay, so we're going to build up his resistance. But resistance to what? You may build up resistance to this and this and this class of bugs, but then there's another one that loves that situation. He comes right in. The way the world actually is an enormously complex, interrelated organism. The way the world actually is an enormously complex, interrelated organism. See, we always look at the human being medically in bits and pieces. Because we have heart specialists, lung specialists, bone specialists, nerve specialists, and so on. And so on. And they each see the human being from their point of view. There are a few generalists, but they realize the human body is so complicated that no one mind can understand it. And furthermore, supposing we do succeed in healing all these people of their diseases, what do we then do about the population problem? I mean, we've stopped cholera, the black bubonic plague, we're getting the better of tuberculosis, we may fix cancer and heart disease. Then what will people die of? Well, then let's go on living. There'll be enormous quantities of it. Then we have to fix this birth thing. Pills for everybody. Then we find what are the effects, the side effects of those pills? What are the psychological effects upon men and women of not breeding children in the usual way? We don't know. We don't know. We don't know. We don't know.
don't know. We don't know. The way the world actually is an enormously complex, interrelated organism. The way the world actually is an enormously complex, interrelated organism.
So you see, there's something going on. This web may be looked at as pattern, and the world is basically patterning. What else do you do when you come to think of it? What else do you do when you come to think of it? When you eat, you are turning food into the pattern of your skeleton, your muscles, and your nervous system. That's a pattern. And you say, you see, basically, hooray for that pattern. That's a pattern. And you say, you see, basically, hooray for that pattern. But then you want other patterns. You like to look through a microscope and see the patterns that exist in the small world. And see the patterns. You like to look through a kaleidoscope or a teleidoscope and see the patterns. You like to have paintings around and see the patterns. You like to watch the water play and see the patterns. You want to watch the birds go and the clouds and all that. Fascinating patterns. And that really doesn't it seem to be the point? I mean, what do you do when you're very rich? Take some rascal of ancient times who became very rich by all sorts of skullduggery and warfare and so on. He got himself a suit of armor, a beautiful sword. And he had the armorer make the most intricate patterns, arabesques of inlaid gold on the steel. Why? Because it's, as they say among the Pennsylvania Dutch, it's for nice. It's a great thing to have all that jazz. And that's what we go for. That's a pattern. And you say, you see, basically, hooray for that pattern. That's a pattern. And you say, you see, basically, hooray for that pattern. But then you want other patterns. You like to look through a microscope and see the patterns that exist in the small world. And see the patterns. You like to look through a kaleidoscope or a teleidoscope and see the patterns. You like to have paintings around and see the patterns. You like to watch the water play and see the patterns. You want to watch the birds go and the clouds and all that. Fascinating patterns. Perfect.
Now you may say, I need some help in this process, and therefore I am going to find someone else to help me. It may be a therapist. It may be a clergyman. It may be a guru. It may be any kind of person who teaches a technique of self-improvement. Now, how will you know whether this person is able to teach you? How can you judge, for example, whether a psychotherapist is effective or just a charlatan? How can you judge whether a guru is himself spiritually wise or merely a good chatterbox? Well, of course, you ask your friends, you ask his other students or patients, and they're all, of course, enthusiastic. You have to be enthusiastic when you bought something expensive. If you bought an automobile, which turned out to be a lemon, it's very difficult to admit that it was a lemon and that you were fooled. And it's the same when you buy a religion or an expensive operation. But what people do not sufficiently realize is that when you pick an authority, whether it's a psychotherapeutic one or a religious one, you chose it. You chose it. You chose it. You chose it. In other words,
I wonder what you would do if you had the power to dream any dream you wanted. I wonder what you would do if you had the power to dream any dream you wanted.
and you would, of course, be able to alter your time sense and slip, say, 75 years of subjective time into 8 hours of sleep. You would, I suppose, start out by fulfilling all your wishes. You could design for yourself what would be the most ecstatic life. Love affairs, banquets, dancing girls, wonderful journeys, love affairs, banquets, dancing girls, wonderful journeys, gardens, music beyond belief. Music beyond belief. Music beyond belief.
I wonder what you would do if you had the power to dream any dream you wanted. I wonder what you would do if you had the power to dream any dream you wanted. Any dream you wanted. Any dream you wanted. Any dream you wanted. I wonder what you would do if you had the power to dream any dream you wanted.
And then after a couple of months of this sort of thing at 75 years a night, you would be getting a little taste for something different. You would move over to an adventurous dimension where there were certain dangers involved and the thrill of dealing with dangers. And you could rescue princesses from dragons and go on dangerous journeys, make wonderful explosions and blow them up. Eventually get into contest with enemies. And after you've done that for some time, you'd think up a new wrinkle to forget that you were dreaming, so that you would think it was all for real, and to be anxious about it, because it'd be so great when you woke up.
I wonder what you would do if you had the power to dream any dream you wanted. I wonder what you would do if you had the power to dream any dream you wanted. Any dream you wanted. Any dream you wanted. Any dream you wanted. I wonder what you would do if you had the power to dream any dream you wanted.
And then you say, well, like children who dare each other on things, how far out could you get? What could you take? What dimension of being lost
of abandonment of your power, what dimension of that could you stand? You could ask yourself this, because you know you'd eventually wake up. After you'd gone on doing this, you see, for some time, you would suddenly find yourself sitting around in this room with all your personal involvement, problems, etc., talking with me. How do you know that's not what you're doing? Could be. Because after all, what would you do if you were God? I wonder what you would do if you had the power to dream any dream you wanted. I wonder what you would do if you had the power to dream any dream you wanted. Any dream you wanted. Any dream you wanted. Any dream you wanted. I wonder what you would do if you had the power to dream any dream you wanted. I wonder what you would do if you had the power to dream any dream you wanted to. I wonder what you would do if you had the power to dream any dream you wanted to. 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 I wonder what you would do if you had the power to dream any dream you wanted to. What would you do if you were God? 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 Looking at it from another way, we push technology to its furthest possible development. And we had, instead of a dial telephone on one's desk, a more complex system of buttons. And one touch, beep, would give you anything you want. Aladdin's lamp. You would eventually have to introduce a button labeled surprise. 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 Because all perfectly known futures, as I pointed out, are past. They have happened, virtually. It is only the true future is a surprise. It is only the true future is a surprise. So if you were God, you would say to yourself, man, get lost. And it's strange that this idea is obscurely embedded in the Christian tradition, when in the Epistle to the Philippians, St. Paul speaks of God the Son, the Logos, the Word of God, who is incarnate in Christ, and says, let this mind be in you which was also in Christ Jesus, who being in the form of God, thought not equality with God a thing to be clung to, but made himself of no reputation, and humbled himself, and was found in fashion as a man, and became obedient to death. Same idea. Same idea as the idea of the dream. That very far out dream. Same idea as the idea of the dream. That very far out dream. Same idea as the idea of the dream. that very far out dream. Same idea as the idea of the dream. Getting as extreme as you can get. As you can get. As you can get. And so this then is the basis of the Hindu view of the universe and of man. The Hindu looks upon the universe as a drama. The Westerner, of course, looks upon the universe as a construct, as something made. And it is not therefore insignificant that Jesus was the son of a carpenter. The Chinese looks upon the universe as an organism, as we shall subsequently see. But the dramatic idea is basic to Hinduism. Now, you can speak about Hinduism on two levels, at least. One I will call the metaphysical level, and the other the mythological level. If you speak on the metaphysical level, you can speak only in negative language. You can say what the divine, the ultimate reality, is not. If you speak on the mythological level, you may speak of what the divine is like. Because myth is not a falsehood, as one uses the word in a sophisticated way. A myth is an image, a concrete image, in terms of which man makes sense of the world. The idea of God the Father, or God the Maker, is a myth. Because it's an image. Because it's an image. And Christian theologians distinguish equally between two kinds of theological language, which are respectively called cataphatic and apophatic. Apophatic language is negative, as when we say God is infinite and eternal. Cataphatic language is mythological, as when we say God the Father, God is love, and all the positive designations. We are not saying God is a cosmic male parent, but is analogous with the Father. We are not saying God is a cosmic male parent, but is analogous with the Father. We are not saying God is a cosmic male parent, but is analogous with the Father. So with Hinduism. So with Hinduism. What I'm going to speak to you in, first of all, is the mythological language of Hinduism. The idea of the universe as the big act. The universe is God playing hide and seek with himself. For God is thought of fundamentally to the Hindu as the self. The self. The cosmic I. It is a basic proposition for the Hindu. That only the self, the Godhead, is real. Only the self, the Godhead, is real. Only the self, the Godhead, is real. There is nothing other than the Godhead. There is nothing other than the Godhead. The appearance, the feeling that there are other things than the But you must be careful about the word illusion. Illusion is related to the Latin ludere. And that means play. And this is why the analogy of the world is dramatic. It's a play. In the sense of a stage play. Now, when you go to the theater, you know what you're going to see is not for real. But the actor, and you will hope that he will be good at it, is going to try and persuade you that it's for real. So that he will so move you that you are crying or sitting in anxiety upon the edge of your chair. And so the audience is almost persuaded to be taken in. Now what about if this would happen with the very best actor of all? The great actor. The audience would, of course, be completely taken in. But in this case, of course, the actor and the audience are the same. The self. The self. The Godhead is real. Only the self. The Godhead is real. Only the self. The Godhead is real. Only the self. The Godhead is real. There is nothing other than the Godhead. There is nothing other than the Godhead.
Only the self, the Godhead is real. Only the self, the Godhead is real.
The self has thus the capacity to abandon itself, to forget itself, to hide from itself, and thus to make the most completely convincing illusion, but in play. And so the activity, the creative activity of the Godhead in Hindus is called lila, which means play. Play. Our word lilt is related to it, I think. But so also in the book of Proverbs, you will find a discourse being given by the divine wisdom. The Lord possessed me in the beginning of his ways before his works of old. Its delight was to rejoice, the King James Bible says, in the presence of God and with the sons of men. But the Hebrew translated rejoice says play. Rejoice is a sort of dignified Elizabethan, but it says play. And St. Thomas, aware of this, said that the divine wisdom was above all to be compared with games, because games are played for their own sake, not for any ulterior motive. So also music is a kind of non-purposive thing, because you don't either play music to reach a destination, nor do you dance to reach a particular place on the floor. It is the doing of it itself that is important. Music. It is the doing of it itself that is important. Music. It is the doing of it itself that is important. Music. It is the doing of it itself that is important. Music. It is the doing of it itself that is important. Because after all, if the object of music were to gain a certain destination, those orchestras that played fastest would be considered the best. The best.
Akira.
Dancing and music, more than other arts, represent the nature of this world. The nature of this world. That it is playful, that it is sport. That it may be sincere, but is definitely not serious. And as G.K. Chesterton well put it once, the angels fly because they take themselves lightly. Music. It is the doing of it itself that is important. Music. It is the doing of it itself that is important. Music. It is the doing of it itself that is important. Music.
The angels fly because they take themselves lightly. The angels fly because they take themselves lightly. The angels fly because they take themselves lightly.
If a beautiful lady should say to me, I love you, and I were to reply, are you serious or are you just playing with me? That would be quite the wrong response. Because I hope she's not serious and that she will play with me. I should say, are you sincere or are you just toying? Because you see, the word play has many different senses. A person who is playing the organ in church is certainly not doing something trivial. When you go to see a play called Hamlet, you're not seeing something trivial. When the concert artist plays Mozart, he is certainly entertaining you, but it's not a trivial entertainment. But on the other hand, we would use play in quite a different sense, when we mean just fooling around, doing it for kicks. Kicks. Doing it for kicks. Doing it for kicks. So it is fundamental, as a matter of fact, to both the Hindu and the Christian tradition, that the universe is the play of God. But the Christian thinks of it in the terms of construction play, like building blocks. The Hindu thinks of it as dramatic play, of the actual participation of the Godhead in the creation, so that every being whatsoever is God in disguise, doing it for kicks. God in disguise. Kicks. God in disguise, doing it for kicks. God in disguise, doing it for kicks. Doing it for kicks. God in disguise. Kicks. God in disguise, doing it for kicks. God in disguise, doing it for kicks. Hinduism speaks of the Godhead as, uses the word Brahman. This is a neuter form in Sanskrit from the root brih, which means to grow, to expand, to swell. The neuter form, Brahman, does not have quite the connotation then, you see, of kingship that we will find attached to the Western idea of God, but is also referred to as Atman. And this word we translate ordinarily the self. So you can have the Paramatman, which means para, the supreme self, or sometimes just the Atman alone, and that means the self in you. But the fundamental principle of Indian philosophy is Atman is Brahman. Your self is the supreme self. Atman is Brahman. Atman is Brahman. Atman is Brahman. Atman is Brahman. It is expressed also in the formula Tat Vam Asi. Colloquially translated, you're it. Or Tat, that, Tuam, Latin Tuam, you, Asi, are. You are that. That thou art. Tat, of course, is first word uttered by a baby. And fathers flatter themselves that it's saying dada. It's not. It's saying that. Pointing to thatness in everything. It's very important to see this. Because everything is just that. Which you won't appreciate at first, perhaps. Everything is meaningless. Everything is meaningless. Only words have meaning, because they point to something other than themselves. The sound water is undrinkable, but it points to the drinkable reality. When you say, though, what is that? Pointing at the water, and somebody says, water, he's not being correct, because what you're pointing at is not the noise water. So it's not water. It's that. It's that. And water's a kind of jazz. It's just doing that. It's just doing that. People are a kind of jazz. They talk and communicate with each other, but what does that mean? Well, they get together and they make more people, and they do this and they do that, and they do this and they do that, and they eat and they go on doing this jazz, but it's just jazz. But it's just jazz. But it's just jazz. But it's just jazz. Jazz. And you begin to see, as you do that, everything's like music, you see. It's all this complicated vibrations. In all kinds of ways. There's a myth. There is in the beginning the divine bird which lays the egg of the world. And the egg splits. And the upper is the heavens and the lower is the earth. So when the worlds are manifested, the Lord breathing out says, hung. And when the worlds are withdrawn, the breath comes back. But if you say hung, sa, hung, sa, hung, sa, hung, it becomes sa, hung, sa, sa, aham. That means, sa means that, the truth, aham, I am that. Imagine when we get to the final moment in which the world is blown up. Imagine the countdown. This is the end. Somebody's pushed the button. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And you can sit and listen to the little waves on the seashore. And you'll get back here into this kind of thinking, and you're hearing the ocean of the universe going. And that's your breathing, too. It's all one rhythm. So it may be that every star was once a planet populated by intelligent people who found out about the fundamental energy of the universe, blew themselves up. And as they blew up, they scattered all kinds of stuff out, which became little planets. Which in a long time, life started all over again.
Sound of the wave. 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 Sound of the wave.
What are you listening to?
Sound of the wave. Sound of the wave. Sound of the wave.
What are you listening to?
Sound of the wave. Sound of the wave. Sound of the wave.
The Hindu theory is very odd. Every kalpa in the Manvantara period, where there's a manifested world, is divided into 4 subdivisions of time, each one of which is called a yuga. That means roughly an epoch or an era. And there are 4 yugas, and they're named after the different throws in the Indian game of dice. There are 4 such throws, and the first is called Krita. That means, Kri means to do. That's when we say something is done, truly done. It's the perfect throw of 4. The second is called Treta, which is the throw of 3. The next is called Svapara, which is the throw of 2. And the final one is called Kali, which means the worst throw, which is the throw of 1. Now, each of these periods of the kalpa are of different lengths. Krita is the longest, and Kali is the shortest, and so ranged. So that when the world is first manifested, as in those dreams that I were mentioning to you, the world is in a golden age to begin with. It's perfect. It's perfect. And that is the longest period of time. Then when we get a little bit more adventurous, you see, Treta means that in this era, a kind of disharmonious element enters into things. It's like a 3-legged chair isn't so secure as a 4-legged chair. It's just a bit inclined to tip. And as it were, a fly in the ointment, the snake in the garden. Then comes Dwapara, in which the forces of good and evil are equally balanced. And finally Kali, which is the shortest period, where the forces of evil are triumphant. And the world is destroyed at the end of it. For then the Godhead appears in the form of Shiva, who represents the destructive aspect of the divine energy, whereas Brahma is the creative, Vishnu the preserver, Shiva the destroyer. But Shiva is always the destroyer in the sense of the liberator, the guy who breaks up the ruts. And he comes on with a blue body and 10 arms, and a necklace of skulls. Indian gods have many arms, because they are cosmic centipedes. They without having to think about it. Like the centipede doesn't have to think about how to manipulate its legs. Like you don't have to think how to grow your hair. And as Shiva dances what is called the Tandava, which is the dance of destruction at the end of the cycle, at the end of the kalpa, you will see that his hands contain clubs and knives and bells. But one hand is like that. And that gesture means don't be afraid. It's a big act. It is all, as it were, the outflowing of your own consciousness, of your own mind. The Hindu life is related to this cosmology. And the objective of life is, of course, in the end, to wake up from the dream when you've had enough. And so the dreaming process is called sometimes samsara. Samsara is the round, the rat race. Samsara is divided into 6 divisions. This is the world of the Deva. This is the same root from which we get both divine and devil. But Deva means angel. The highest and most successful beings in the universe. And so opposite, this is the world of Naraka, who are the most unsuccessful. These are the purgatorial worlds of extreme suffering. This is the world of Ashura. They are also angels, but they're angry angels, representing the wrath potential of energy. This is the world